Hello, everybody. My name is Puppetine from the Geeky Puppet Show here on the Geeky Puppet Show today. After the long day we've had with the read and stuff, feeling a little under the weather, so I'm going to just stick off of camera for this evening. However, I'm not alone in talking about the Sandman. Of course, beside me, you can see him. He's right there. He is Dalton. He is the Authenticator.
Good evening, everyone.
Indeed.
Once more into the autopsying of the corpse of the thing I used to really, really love, namely the Sandman.
Well, these two episodes are quite together. I think the last episode, truthfully, was kind of separate with how they handled it, the lightness of it. It was definitely something that I really enjoyed. However, now we're back into the fray. And so what delicious drama are we getting involved today? Well, Desire would tell you that there is a vortex swirling, one who can walk through others' dreams, and her name is Rose. Well, Dream himself, he's busy. He's got to deal with his realm right now, you know. So he goes ahead and sends Matthew to watch after this woman that I just said her name. It's Rose. We get a brief touch on her history about how, you know, she was with her family. They broke up, and the mom got the daughter, and the son stayed with the father, and then it just devolves from there. And essentially, she is alone. She has one friend in the world, and for some reason, she is being flown off to, England. Jolly good England. Yes. Mm-hmm. And there she meets a woman who was actually one we've seen before, a child who was stuck in an endless sleep until, well, it ended. And essentially that's where things start to come together. We know what Rose wants, her brother, and we know the odd what's the term, Dalton? The odd assortment of characters that fuels her journey along her way.
Yeah,
Especially when she goes to Florida.
Our dramatis personae here.
Yeah. Listen, I live in Florida. It's pretty accurate.
I mean, a quick perusal of the internet's vast cavalcade of Florida man memes will tell you, Florida man be weird. Ladies and gentlemen.
We're very odd. But yes. So with this, there's not a lot of story to really dig into, I feel. Like, we were very careful with it. I don't feel like being careful with it. Because essentially it gets sped along.
Yeah,
Dream is essentially using Rose to track down one of the three, not four, three lost
major arcana of Dream. Basically, Dream, like any monarch, has courtiers, and because he is the Lord of Dreams, his courtiers are essentially major fixtures within the human collective unconscious, I guess is the best way of putting it.
Yeah.
As in, like, they're literal Jungian archetypes that have gone just up and missing while their master was away. And Dream is understandably not very pleased with this. Yeah. Not at all. But so the vortex pulls things within Dreams to her, so if there is, you know, several Jungian archetypes made flesh wandering about in the world, they're probably going to get sucked to her at some point. So he proceeds to kill two ravens with one stone, I suppose. But I'm Ching.
Hey, he wouldn't kill a raven. I don't think.
Put a pen in that whole thing, because there's gonna be a Dream acting out of character segment of this live stream, and I'm gonna be annoyed.
Yeah. So Dream takes an angle towards this to capture Ghoul, who is the one who has essentially trapped Rose's brother. Not trapped. Let's be clear. Ghoul has taken Rose's brother's dreams and made her own dreaming because, well, Dream was gone. And so
She walled it off from the true dreaming, and
yeah,
that's one of the ways that Dream and the denizens of the dreaming figure out that something is not right here. Because even if a mortal soul was gone from the mortal plane, i.e., the human mundane world, it should still, unless it's dead, have a connection to the dreaming. But
yep,
Dream is obviously on pretty good speaking terms with his sister dear, and he checked, and Jed isn't in the realm of death either. So some shenanigans are afoot clearly here, and only one of the major arcana, the aforementioned Jungian archetypes of all dreaming, would have the power to literally wall a section of the dreaming away from the rest of the dreaming.
yeah.
So
Well,
the game is afoot, as the old Sherlock Holmes quote goes.
yeah, and it's understandable what Ghoul is doing because Ghoul, while being a nightmare, is not cruel. No, in fact, Ghoul has been inside the mind of Jed, creating a superhero world for him. He's the Sandman, and he goes and faces these villains with his magic sand. It's a lot of fun. It is. Um,
This this point of rage. The thing is, the, the original run of Neil Gaiman's The Sandman was a DC comic, and
yes,
as such, rather expertly unified large parts of the DC Comics lore at the time because this was the 90s when things were running relatively smoothly. Now, in the history of DC Comics, there have been two characters prior to the reveal of Dream himself to bear the title the Sandman. One of them was Wesley Dobbs, the Sandman of the 1940s Golden Age and a member of the Justice Society of America, and the other was
that
Hector Hall, specifically Hector Hall after he died in the line of duty as Dr. Fate, or one of the incarnations of Dr. Fate, and got roped into taking over for the other secondary Sandman, who was a associate of Wesley Dobbs, Gareth Sanford. Unfortunately, because Neil Gaiman wants to piss on my dreams, um, there are no DC connections to this version of the Sandman, and thus this is the best we get as a reference to the Sandman, despite the fact that Hector's wife Lyda and Hector himself, in a heavily altered form, still exist in this series for
well,
some godforsaken fucking reason, because it's not enough to just ignore all the DC things. You have to actively pervert them. Now, it's
well
grr.
here. Well, I mean, the suit clearly does take inspiration from
Yeah, no,
the Hector Hall.
it's very clearly Hector's and Garrett's suit, the one that
Yeah.
was given to us by the legendary king of all comics, Jack Kirby. Hail to the king.
Yep, yep.
Um,
But here's the thing with that. I feel like I didn't need a direct tie-in. I think what we got was enough for me. But personally, I really did enjoy those scenes because it makes sense that he would, because in the comic, if I remember correctly, he is not the superhero. He has two demons that are basically giving him dreams, and they are the superheroes, and they bring him around.
well, it's less that and more. Um, Brute and Glob were two major arcana within the comics. They were the embodiments of brute strength and base cunning. And when Dream Vamoosed, they decided to try their hand at making their own dream realm, which they could control, but they needed a mortal host essentially to do that. So they got Gareth Sanford um, to be their Sandman, and they convinced him that he was the Sandman. And essentially trying to split his mind between his waking life and the dreaming permanently drove Gareth Sanford insane, and he eventually died. So Brute and Glob were like, "Oh, okay, that completely screwed that one up. Let's start with a guy who's already dead to begin with." Enter Hector Hall, who died in the line of duty as Doctor Fate, or again, a incarnation of Doctor Fate, and whose soul, because of being bonded with the Amulet of Anubis, one of Doctor Fate's relics, was kind of in an obtainable state for Brute and Glove. So they yoinked it and sold Hector the idea of being the Sandman again, along with his wife Leda and a boy named Jed, who we find out through the course of the proper Neil Gaiman Sandman series. They essentially are parasitizing Jed's mind because Jed, in the comics and also kind of here, although it's much more severe in the comics, is being heavily abused to the point that he is taking shelter in his dreams, and Brute and Glob are more than happy to facilitate this so long as they can essentially parasitize his mind and wall it off from the true dreaming. Which, of course, makes Daddy Dream none too happy with any of this.
No. Understandably. I mean, the dreaming is his domain, even if.
Well, it's also not good for a mortal mind to be cut off from the dreaming period, and even less so to be locked in a permanent state of dreaming, or a more or less permanent state of dreaming.
I wouldn't say that
Especially an
it's.
abused child. So yeah,
I wouldn't say that
he's not happy.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's permanent. I do feel like it was a slight exaggeration because she wasn't trying to keep him in the dreaming forever. She was trying to essentially give him something to look forward to because his real life sucked.
Yeah,
Utterly sucked.
she essentially was supposed to be a source of nightmares for him, but she saw why he had so many freaking nightmares, namely, this kid is just not okay. And she took pity on him and decided, what if she used her knowledge of human fear to prevent him from experiencing fear, thereby making herself more of a dream than a nightmare?
Yeah, and I get why. I get why. But of course, Dream pretty much does meet Rose Walker because Rose comes into the dreaming, and has, well, a meeting with him accidentally, but he doesn't send her away. He
Yeah,
goes ahead and says,
she walks in. She straight up walks into the middle of his throne room while he and Lucian are having a meeting.
"Yep, yep,
Um, and unlike in the comics, where Dream is totally unfazed and unsurprised by this, because Dream is the king of courtly mannerisms. In the show, it completely flabbergasts him, even though this is a standard thing that Dream Vortexes are able to do, which confuses the fuck out of me. And once again, we'll put a pin in this for 5 seconds from now because we have to talk about the scene with Galt and her telling him off before we'll
we're
talk about
almost
it.
there." Though I will say, from the sound of it, they may have depowered vortexes as much. So because they have appeared before, uh, and whenever they have, I guess they just have never reached his realm. Like they
There,
are able to go into other dreams, like we see Rose do in the next episode, like the second episode.
yeah,
But
and maybe in this particular telling of the story, maybe the fact that Rose is, spoilers, half endless, maybe the fact that she's half endless, or at least descended from one of the endless, because Desire is playing both sides of the scheme here. Um, maybe
yeah, I just saw that on the
makes her more
wiki. So.
powerful. So yeah, maybe that makes her more powerful than the other vortexes. But in the comics, this was never addressed because it never needed to be addressed because Dream just does not get phased by anything in the comics. one of the reasons why I like him so much as a character, and one of the reasons why I'm incredibly harsh to this particular adaptation. Because of
Well,
all the characters they gave sympathetic backstories and sympathetic motivations to, everyone from Roderick Burgess to John Dee to Galt to basically every character, to even the Corinthian to some extent, they massively shortchange the main character and ostensible King of Dreams in a myriad of ways that annoy the crap out of
um, I don't know. I feel like maybe a bit of that is. I think Dream himself as a character, he is supposed to be beyond that. So, like, we're not looking for a backstory per se with Dream. We're looking
me.
for
No,
him.
but that's what I'm saying. I think they're trying to make him more vulnerable in order to humanize him. Is what's going on. I think the reason why this version of Dream is so much off of his game is because Neil Gaiman didn't think that the old school regal mannerisms that he was given in the comic would fly, even though they were more accurate to the actual character from mythology that the character is based on, and so on and so forth. And so a lot of Dream's grandeur gets shortchanged, and he just becomes more and more incompetent and unfeeling when he wasn't in the comics. Also, speaking of things that would have humanized him that are not present, that would have actually been organic to the comic, one of my all-time favorite scenes in the comic, um, in this particular part of the comic, I should say, because there's a lot of favorite scenes in the comic, um, is when Dream finally makes it past in the comic Brute and Globs, but in the um, show Galt's wardings, he finds again in the comics it was Hector Hall, in the show it's Jed, and a similar scene plays out both times, but the reaction to it is slightly different, and it's not even slightly different; it's massively different. Because in the comic, when Dream finds out that Brute and Glob have hoodwinked Hector Hall into believing that he, a mortal human ghost, is the Sandman, Dream laughs hysterically for a good like page and a half, and then the line he gives is, "Oh humanity, I love you," because he's so amused by the fact that this, in his words, little ghost, um, has been convinced by his servants that he is the Lord of Dreams, that he can't even bring himself to be that. He just the as yet grandiose and gothic Lord of Dreams busts a gut laughing at this irony. It's hilarious.
I mean, yeah, there was a look of amusement when he said that he was the Sandman, but it's
Yeah,
not
but
the same. I get that.
he didn't break
Yeah.
down into hysterical laughter. And given that the Dream of the comics was this, you know, very stern, very worldly, very old world, courtly character, to have him just completely break down into hysterical laughter made all the difference, because it's unsettling to have this character who is by his very nature stern and stoic and courtly just burst out laughing.
Yeah, but they don't have that here. And instead,
No, he just kind of
we've
gives a
got
look, and it's like yeah. But anyway, so getting
yeah,
into the thing.
because ultimately Dream can't really be bothered to like further assist Rose at that point because he's like, I got to deal with this. So
Yeah,
bye. Time to wake up.
I've got things. I've been away for a century. I've got things. So
Yeah, I've got
bye.
things. Yeah, and so he takes Ghoul, takes Ghoul, and is like, listen, bitch, you've been cutting him off from the dreaming, and you have been going against your very nature.
Feeding
Who do
on
you
his
think you are?
mind. It's been a whole thing.
Who do
So
you think you are? What are you doing? And the ghoul says, I wanted to do something good. This is me. And so he goes ahead and says,
I want to
no,
be a dream and not a nightmare, and he's just like, but your purpose is to be a
that
nightmare.
you
And
literally the whole point of your existence is to be a nightmare. So, and she's like, no, before she gives an ominous warning because she's banished for what, 1,000 years
uh,
to
it
darkness?
in the comics it was an indeterminate length of time, and it was said to be several thousand years. But I don't know with regards to the new show, because the new show likes to cut corners everywhere it can for whatever reason. But
Well,
the problem I have with this is, in the comics, for one thing, there was no such sympathetic backstory for Brute and Glob. Brute and Glob are, again, literally the embodiments of brute strength and base cunning. So they are just out to do whatever they can do. Um, and for another thing, I doubt that Dream of the comics would have paid this much mind. He would have just on the spot rewritten her, and it's like, okay, you want to be a dream instead of a nightmare, fine, click. Like it would have taken him 5 seconds, and it would have amounted to, oh, so all I have to do to make you happy is make you a dream instead of a nightmare. Done. And then he would have been off, checked off the checklist, and then on to the next thing. But here, it's yet another case of, it takes his courtly, regal distance and turns it into a character flaw of lack of empathy, which comes right the hell out of nowhere and makes Dream look like an incompetent wretch. And when you combine that with Lucian kind of subtly usurping a lot of Dream's role, and in fact, a lot of the other members of the Dreaming straight up coming to her rather than him, and him being necessarily pissed about it, and the show framing him as being in the wrong for being pissed about it. I dislike that every character except Dream is given so much more validity and so much more earnestness and so much more weight to them. But Dream, the ostensible main character, just gets increasingly shat upon, made incompetent, made heartless, where he certainly was not in the, like, okay, he fucked up with Nada, but again, that is largely due to the fact that, in all honesty, he shouldn't even have the capacity to fall in love with mortals, and the only reason he did with Nada is because Desire was fucking around. But that's neither here nor there. But
I think I don't know. I think that there's an element of it that is supposed to be depicted as somewhat of a flaw, but no, he is essentially he's been stuck away for 100 years, and he's come back, and his court has fallen apart. Yes, Lucienne has been keeping things together the best she could, but she kept nothing together.
well,
Everybody was out
well,
doing nothing. Every dream escaped. They only came back because they
when
knew.
they heard the boss was
Yeah.
back and were like, "Oh shit, we're fucked."
So yes, I understand that Lucien supposedly took care of the realm. At the same time, look at the
And to
state of
be
the
fair,
realm.
when she tells him that in Imperfect Host in the second episode, he thanks her,
Yeah,
and then essentially is like, "Don't worry, you
yeah.
don't
But
have to do that anymore. I got this."
and he
And
has to
like,
say it this episode too, because what does the pumpkin fellow? What does Mark
uh,
Hamill have to say?
Merv Pumpkinhead goes to Lucian instead of Dream, and he literally straight up says, while Matthew is sitting, I guess he's while Matthew is ravening right next to her,
Raven's gonna
he
Raven.
he just straight up says, he just straight up says,
You
we
go to
all know
her
you we
first.
we all know you secretly run this place. We don't want to deal with the boss. And it's like, you Okay, at that point, I have no more sympathy for you, Marvin.
Yeah,
You get you get dispersed back into dream dust for all I care at this point.
yeah, his head's gonna rot. Because that's not how it works. And I think that's why at the end they have to have Dream look at Lucian and say, "Listen, I appreciate what you've done. I know you don't agree with what I just did,
But
but
I
this is my place. I'm going to be grateful for what you've done, but don't forget who is the king of dreams."
and again, my major problem with this is how the show has chosen to frame it. The show has chosen to frame it as he is being a petulant child. They're
I
framing his actions as though he's Jeffrey Barath or Joffrey Baratheon. In, instead instead of a monarch who is understandably pissed that his vassals are scheming behind his back, apparently.
I don't know. I agree, but I also disagree because I they haven't
And again,
blatantly.
maybe this is a factor of I've seen the whole show and I know how this wraps up, and it
Yeah.
it it's framed as though he was in the wrong in this moment,
Well, we
and
only
I
have
don't
two
like
more
it.
episodes left. Two more episodes, and then we will have finished that, and then we're going to have a little special. Yay! But we'll get to that when we get there.
Yeah,
But no, next week's the finish, and we're going to, I guess, wrap up the Dollhouse storyline. And hopefully it wraps up okay. I'm definitely feel like the first half of this season was way stronger. That's just because Preludes and Nocturne is so damn good, though. Let,
it,
let's be let's be honest.
I again, as much as I love every part of the Sandman except for the last two volumes, which are the Kindly Ones and the Wake, because fuck the ending. But
I don't know the other.
as much as I love every part of the Sandman except the ending, um, every time it focuses for too long on explicitly human characters, I get bored. And I feel weird saying that because apparently I'm a minority somewhat in the Sandman fandom. They like the human elements and they don't like the grandiose DC connections or the grandiose mythology connections. And I'm just like I can't co-sign that. Like for me, the two weakest volumes of the Sandman that I can tolerate. We're not even going to discuss the Kindly Ones or the Wake because fuck the ending. Um, the two weakest volumes that I can tolerate are The Doll's House and Game of You because we spend just so much freaking time with vanilla humans, and I'm like, that's fine. I'm fine with them being a factor in this because, of course, humanity will always be a factor in these sorts of stories, but there's so much deeper lore in the wider DC universe and also just the mythological and historical connections, like the thing with Shakespeare, like some of the individual one-off stories that we get in um, volumes um, volumes through uh, six through eight. Um, a lot of the best parts of the Sandman for me are when Dream is having a subtle influence on characters from mythology, characters from history, characters from folklore, um, little bits and pieces of historical nods here and there. Like even the sleep sickness from Preludes and Nocturnes is a reference to an actual historical event. Um, and I like when those sorts of things happen. I don't really have any use for human characters other than as basically um, secondary characters with regards to this.
Or cannon fodder.
I not cannon fodder because
Cannon fodder.
one of the things I do love about most of the Endless, fuck you, Desire and Despair, because just generally fuck those two.
Okay,
Um,
okay. No more,
but
no more f
but
bombs. I only have a limit.
sorry, but one of the things I love about most of the Endless is even though they are there to serve all life and even several things that are technically inanimate, like in the comics, it was made very very clear that stars themselves could dream. it was very heavily implied that the reason why stars burn is because they burn bright with their own dreams. Um, but that's neither here nor there. Um, even though the endless serve all of existence, they have kind of a soft spot for humanoid races and in particular humanity. So
Yeah.
it's never going to be a fuck off humanity I hate you thing. It's just going to be, given that we have all of mythology, all of in the comics the wider DC lore, all of folklore and history and all of these wondrous places and times that we can focus on. It annoys me when we focus too much on basically a comic book fantasy equivalent of a sitcom in the case of the Doll's House. Um,
Yeah,
so
I'm not a big fan of the Doll's House thus far. Yeah, even reading it, because I have been, I didn't finish before watching these episodes, but no, it's just not that. It can't hold up to Preludes
it
and Nocturnes
it
for me.
it tries. It really does try, but
Yeah,
it's a matter of, would you rather see Dream interacting with some random slubs in a tenant house, or would you rather see Dream interacting with you know the kings and queens of fairy, or
it
William Shakespeare, or an immortal who's lived since the 1300s, or
yeah,
there's so many better options for
it
what we can see in Dream interacting.
it's like when you put on Solo, you know that guy cannot hold up to Harrison
It,
Ford as
yeah,
on
it's
Solo.
like
It's
we,
not
we
his fault. It's not like he does a bad job of playing of well
but
the
it's just a story that by its very nature is limited in comparison to even some of the one-offs that we can get in the rest of the Star Wars universe. Same thing here.
yep. So that's that.
Even some of the one-offs are better than extended
Yeah,
swaths of Rose and pals doing Rose and pal things.
yeah.
And
So
the cast of Game of You is very similar in that regard.
oh, sorry. Ever hear a puppet yawn before? Now you have.
Yeah.
But no, there's a element to this that's just not as pleasing as the first part. And I think a large part of that is the fact that Dream is being limited in his own series, and that goes in the books and in the show. So no, it's not just I can already hear because Black Pills have probably panned the series. I don't pay attention to them. I don't know.
Like I really don't like this adaptation. I will fully go out on a limb here and say I do not like this adaptation. However, it is not entirely without merits. Like the actors, God bless them, are trying with what they are given. It's just that what they are given is a pale, pale shadow in comparison to the genre defining epicness and magnum opusness that was the comic.
Yeah, I think that this is just sadly a case of it can't it can't even be as good as the book because the book at this point is not very good. I feel that
Yeah,
way. I'm sorry.
it's one of the, as I said, this is towards the bottom of the tolerable volumes of the Sandman. Now,
Yeah,
granted, there are moments of Doll's House that I absolutely love. We will talk about Collectors next time and how they kind of massacred that here as well. Um, but yeah, on a scale of Sandman, um,
it's just not very good.
yeah, the kindly
You,
ones in the wake are way below even this. But then you have Game of You and Doll's House right above them. So
yeah.
it just isn't a good part of Sandman.
So, so ultimately, yeah, that's the truth of the matter. These two episodes aren't very good. They aren't. And it's not that they're bad per se. It's just that they are not as good as what we had
Compared to
just
everything
last week.
else, it's not working. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Episodes 1 through 6, I have enjoyed. There's been serious moments of enjoyment in the retelling of a story I already knew. But here, as somebody who does not know this story, because I am starting to read it, but as I'm reading this second part, it's just not even, it doesn't hold a candle to what we had started with. And that's just a sad state. So I don't know. I'm going to have to wait and see how it ends next time. And then after that, we have a special that we have to go over because they released a little, I guess, animated
Yeah.
thing.
Originally, the show was going to have 11 episodes right from the off, but I guess Netflix kind of 86'd it because episode 10 was the end of the plot part of this season. And then rather than wait for episode 11 to be the pilot of next season, they decided to release 11 episodes after all, and so there's effectively a two-part bonus episode of the Sandman now.
Well,
That
and that
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 that,
works
that
because I know a lot of people. There are a lot of people that have enjoyed this, have enjoyed the show, and so it's always good whenever you have something extra to add on to that. And it has David Tennant, so
and for the record, episode 11 is adapting two stories from the third volume, which is Dream Country, namely Dream of a Thousand Cats and Calliope, which are two of my favorite issues in the entire series.
you're a
Um,
biased cat owner, Dalton. You
it,
can't.
it's not even Dream of a Thousand Cats that I like the best. Actually, that one I usually forget exists. It's Calliope that usually gets me. Um,
But we're going to
but
have to wait to talk about that because I
but
haven't
yeah,
seen it.
we'll be waiting a couple weeks to deal with that one. But yes, again, if you're going to start with Sandman, don't start with the show. For the love of God, start with the comic. And Audible did a pretty serviceable job adapting it in audio drama form. So start with those two, and then if you absolutely need more Sandman in your life, then you can watch the show and feel the disappointment.
I'm going to disagree. I'm going to disagree. Go the other way around. It's like no, it's like when you're watching an adaptation and it is serviceable. It does its job in translating the material, but there are things and elements missing.
It's a Disney
If
live
you're
action remake, basically, is what it is.
oh, please don't compare it to that. Those are
No,
really bad.
no, I know, but that's what we're dealing with.
I,
The
I
feeling that you have of seeing your favorite Disney movie get a Disney live action remake is exactly the feeling I get when I have to watch this show.
well, oh, sorry again with the puppets yawning and things, but
Which to be fair is not as bad as Netflix could have done, because we could be talking about Cowboy Bebop or Death Note adaptation
Resident
level of
Evil.
that. But 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 it's about on par with The Witcher, so it's not even as good as Chilling Adventures of Sabrina or The Umbrella Academy or one of Netflix's better live action shows.
Oh, I'm definitely enjoying it more than Umbrella Academy. So I gotta disagree there. But that's another matter. I think that when it comes to what somebody is going to enjoy, if you have some interest in the show, you should check it out. But then make sure to go read that book because that book, at least those first 8 issues, are phenomenal. They're great. And there's a reason why it is a critically acclaimed work of art
it,
because it
it,
is.
it, it's a classic from a time when classics actually were a thing,
Yeah.
and it's still to
It's the
this day my
last.
favorite comic ever. It's still to this day one of my favorite comics ever written. So
Some of the last classics there will ever be. But that about does it for us. We want to make sure that you have your say. If you've seen the show, let us know your opinions on these episodes or any episodes. That doesn't really matter. But say something down there. What did you have for breakfast today? Are you eating properly? Let us know. Also, make sure to like and subscribe. But that about does it. We want to thank you one last time before we say bye.
cheers, guys.